In a remote corner of the mountains, where the days slid by like slow clouds and the wind whispered secrets that no one remembered, there lived an elderly master named Genshō. He had no disciples, no temple, no name written in books. His home was a humble wooden cabin, built next to an old willow tree that gracefully leaned toward the river. Every morning, Genshō would sit under the tree's branches and watch the flowing water. He spoke to no one, but those who passed along the path said his eyes held the calm of 1,000 winters. Some came to him with questions, others with prayers, but he only offered hot tea and a smile that seemed to come from the silence itself. One day, a young man named Run arrived in the clearing. He had wandered for weeks, his heart full of anxiety and his feet sore from rocky paths. He was searching for something he couldn't name, a purpose, a sign, an answer. Seeing the old man, he bowed and asked, "Master, how will I know if what I desire will truly come to me?" Genshō did not respond. He simply extended a cup of tea and pointed to the river. "Watch," he said at last, his voice as soft as the breeze. "The water does not chase the stones, surrounds them, and yet it never stops moving forward." Ren furrowed his brow, confused, but the master had already closed his eyes, as if the conversation was complete. That was the beginning of his learning. Ren decided to stay with the master, not out of obligation, but because something in the stillness of the place spoke to him more clearly than any words. Every day, he helped with simple tasks: chopping wood, gathering water, sweeping leaves. But his mind remained restless, like a nervous horse tied to a post. "I don't understand, Master," he said one afternoon as they lit the oil lamp. "Shouldn't I fight for what I want? Isn't it my duty to chase my dreams?" Genshō picked up a dry branch and threw it into the fire. The flames devoured it slowly, crisp and golden. "The bamboo doesn't fight to grow," he said. "It doesn't look at the pine with envy, nor does it hurry to reach the sky. It simply rises when it is its time, neither before nor after." Ren clenched his fists. He felt the master was speaking in riddles. In his chest, there burned the urgency to act, to achieve, to obtain. He had been taught that success was pursued with strength, with effort, with constant struggle. And now, in front of an old man sweeping leaves as if they were petals, all of that seemed to fade away. But what if it never comes? He whispered. Genshō looked at the sky, where the moon was beginning to hang like a white lamp. "Then it wasn't meant for you." Silence. Ren didn't know whether to feel relieved or hurt, but for the first time he allowed the silence to speak to him. The days passed and then the weeks. Autumn began to paint the trees with fire, and each morning, Ren swept the ground covered in leaves with a slowness that would have once made him despair. He was starting to understand that not everything required urgency, and that the world kept turning even when one stopped. One day, while gathering dry branches near the river, he saw something that caught his attention. A leaf spinning in the air, dancing without a fixed path. It floated for a long while, crossing the water, and finally settled gently on a rock on the other side. Run watched it in silence, as if something in that simple gesture answered a question he hadn't even known he carried inside. "That leaf didn't choose its destiny," Genshō said beside him, as though Ran hadn't heard him approach. "Nor did it resist it." Ran nodded slowly. There was more wisdom in that leaf than in all the books he had read. "So, there's nothing to be done?" he asked. The master smiled. "You must be. You must live. You must move when it's time and stop when it's not. Like the river, like the wind, like that leaf." Ren lowered his gaze. For the first time, his heart didn't feel rushed. He still didn't have all the answers, but the search had changed shape. And within him, a seed of understanding began to sprout. That night, during dinner, Ren served rice in 2 clay bowls, one for the master and the other for himself. Genshō observed him, then took Ren's bowl and poured half of the rice into his own. "Why are you doing that?" Ren asked, surprised. "Because your bowl was too full," the master replied calmly. "And when a bowl is full, it can't receive more." Ren furrowed his brow, confused by the apparent contradiction. "Isn't it better to have more?" "It depends," said Genshō as he ate slowly. "Sometimes having too much is the cause of our thirst. Fill your life only with what's necessary. That way there will be space for the essential to arrive." Ren lowered his gaze to his bowl, now lighter, and understood something that went beyond the rice. He had come to this place with his heart full of expectations, desires, and fears. He had wanted to force the future, to fill it with achievements, like someone filling a basket without realizing it couldn't carry it. That night, as he went to sleep, he lay with the window open. He listened to the wind through the trees, the distant call of an owl, the constant murmur of the river. Everything was in its place. Nothing hurried, nothing resisted, and he thought, perhaps emptiness is not a lack, but sacred space. One morning, while Ren was gathering water from the river, a stranger arrived at the clearing. He wore elegant clothes, carried a gleaming sword at his side, and walked with a firm step. Upon seeing the old man under the willow tree, he barely inclined his head and said, "I've heard that a wise man lives here. I seek advice." Genshō did not respond. He simply offered him a cup of tea and pointed to a stone for him to sit on. The man drank quickly and spoke. "I've won many battles. I've accumulated gold, land, and respect. But something inside me remains empty. I feel like life slips through my fingers. What am I missing?" The master looked at the traveler with calm eyes and asked, "Have you seen the river?" "Of course," the man replied, somewhat impatient. "And have you ever tried to hurry it?" The stranger frowned. "That would be absurd." "And yet," said Genshō, "many do that with their lives." Silence fell like a cloak between the 3 of them. Even Ren, listening from the shadow of a tree, felt that those words were not only for the stranger, but for him as well. The stranger lowered his gaze. He placed the cup on a rock and left with a slight bow. He didn't say another word, and although his steps grew distant, Ren sensed that something within him had changed. That afternoon, the young man understood that he wasn't the only one searching. But few knew how to stop long enough to listen to the answer. The seasons passed. The leaves that once covered the ground gave way to flowers, and then to fruits. A small tree near the river, which Ren had seen bloom in spring, now offered its first golden pears. Genshō brought one to the young man and placed it in his hands. "Take it," he said. "It's ready." Ren held it, feeling its weight, its softness. He took a bite and closed his eyes. It was sweet, juicy, perfect. "How long has it taken to ripen?" he asked. "Since long before you arrived," the master replied. "But we've done nothing. Just waited for it, cared for it, trusted." Ren looked at the tree and then at the fruit in his fingers. "So, is it the same with what we long for?" "Yes," Genshō nodded. "What is meant for you grows in silence. You may not see it sprout, you may doubt its existence. But if it's yours, it will come to you when you're ready. Not before, not after." For a moment, Ren felt that all his journey, all his weariness, all his questions, had led him to that pear in his hands. A simple fruit. And yet it was the answer. It wasn't about forcing, nor about running. It was about being, about trusting, about allowing. And for the first time in his life, Ren didn't wish for anything more. The day came, like all cycles that find their end, when Ren felt he must leave. Not out of restlessness, nor discontent, but from something deeper, a gentle impulse of the soul that whispered, "It's time." He approached the master, who was meditating under the willow tree, and bowed silently. "Thank you for teaching me," he said. "Though I still don't have all the answers, I've learned not to rush them." Genshō slowly opened his eyes, as though waking from a dream without haste. "You didn't come to find answers," he said. "You came to empty yourself of the wrong questions." Ren smiled. He carried little. A small bag of rice, a blanket, and a smooth stone he had picked up from the river as a keepsake. But inside him, he carried something far more valuable. The quiet certainty that what was his would not avoid him, and that what wasn't could not be held onto. "Will I see you again?" he asked without anxiety. The master looked up at the clear sky. "If it is meant to be, it will happen." Ren needed no more. He turned and began walking down the path between the trees. The wind brushed his face like an invisible blessing, and the distant song of the river accompanied him for a long time. He carried no map, nor clear destination, but with each step he took, he walked in peace. Because he no longer sought, he simply lived. Years later, a weary traveler arrived at a peaceful valley, guided by the murmur of an ancient river. He walked with his back straight, his face serene, and his eyes filled with light. He carried no questions, only steps. He found an old tree, a willow bent toward the water, and beneath it, an empty hut. The master was no longer there. No one knew if he had left or if he had dissolved into the air like the morning mist. The traveler, who was once called Ren, sat under the branches, closed his eyes and smiled. The river kept flowing. The leaves kept falling. The wind still whispered. Nothing had changed except for him, and he understood, without the need for words, that everything he had sought had been there from the beginning. In the murmur of the water, in the empty bowl, in the fruit that ripens on its own, in the silence that demands nothing. What was his had arrived, and the rest simply had gone with the wind.